Zenless Zone Zero, ladies and gentlemen. You've probably heard about it, especially recently because it very, very recently came out. It's the newest Hoyoverse game. You probably know them from Genshin Impact or Honkai Star Rail. I gave it a shot. It was my first time playing a Hoyoverse game. And to be honest, I just wanted to deliver my thoughts on it since it's kind of a hot topic at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide this into two separate segments, the good and the bad. And I'm going to start off with the good, because there is good to be talked about, and I know, like, Hoyoverse haters are probably going to hate that I said that, but first of all, character design is on point. All the characters look very unique. They have amazing silhouette designs. If you just saw the silhouette, you could probably guess what character it was, and that is, at least in my opinion, a sign of very good character design. In addition, the voice acting and use of voice to characterize the characters, like, for example, Billy Kid has, like, kind of a more high-pitched, like, kind of idiot voice. I love him so much, I could say that. It does a very good job of characterizing him as, like, who he is. He can kind of switch from being, like, business mode to being whiny, and I think that's kind of an underrated element for a lot of character design, as not only their physical design, but also their vocal design. For example, Anbi's design and voice are very unique, and I honestly think she's a pretty fascinating character. The way that they can use her simultaneously for writing serious situations and also writing her in comic relief situations, like where, you know, being more robotic, she doesn't really understand a lot of stuff like jokes. I think that's also a sign of good characterization and character design. So yeah, characters have very, like, unique, like, general shapes, builds. They have different looks that visually set them apart, which is a very important thing. To be clear, I got about 2 or 3 hours into the game before I stopped recording. And by stopped recording, I meant opened OBS once I got done playing, just to find out it wasn't recording the entire time. And that's why I don't have B-roll footage. The characters are very stereotypical. You've got Nicole, who's like the very cunning businessman. You've got Billy Kid, who's like the kind of like not serious comic relief character who kind of either sets up or is the punchline. In most cases, the latter. And you've got Anbi, who can kind of be used for both purposes of being serious and for comic relief. The graphics and shading, I can't go on enough about. Like, Hoyoverse is known for having gorgeous graphics. Explains why the file size is 110 gigabytes. Because it's amazing, really pretty. They use, like, smear frames, which is normally, like, a 2D animation sort of thing, which is where the animation doesn't look quite right if you pause it. For example, if you look at Rubber Hose animation, it's named quite literally because, like, the shape and movement of the limbs aren't realistic, but what it is they contort in very strange ways to make the motion look more fluid. That sort of spear frames are kind of a modernized version of that. They managed to incorporate that into 3D, which I don't know how they do it, but that is, as kind of an animation nerd myself, that is genuinely really impressive. They use amazing squash and stretch. They follow, like, the principles of animation really well, but I still will never understand how they're able to do smear frames in 3D animation. That's crazy to me. And for my final point, there is a dog. That's a shopkeeper. Do I need to say more? His name is Hal. He is beautiful. He is my child. If anyone hurts him, I will hurt them. I will take your kneecaps. So yeah, to be honest, that is the good, I have to say, unfortunately. More overarching thing that I've been kind of thinking about is mostly the negatives. Because the gameplay is very fluid. The gameplay is very novel, fluid. It has amazing combat snapping, which will basically just lock on your target. You don't have to be hyper precise with your actual movements. It doesn't, like, overbear and encroach on your actual sense of movement, but it complements, like, what you're trying to do nicely. At least that I found to my playstyle. So even though the gameplay is very solid and novel, I would even say, it's a standard roguelike. The main duo, the lead characters, Wise and God, I forgot the gal's names. Petra? Oh, it was Bella. The main duo have very boring designs, personalities, and voices. They look incredibly bland, especially Wise, which is a very stark contrast. If you look at all the other characters in the game, they're very colorful. They very much have their own, like, unique setup. The main duo look like free-to-use VR chat models. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. That's not to say the models don't, like, look nice. They just have nothing really to offer. They are just kind of basic. And again, if you've seen me talk about JoJo, which I did, if you look up in the top right, there should be a little exclamation mark. You can go click that to see me go rant about JoJo for 35 minutes. I tend to prefer when designs are simpler as opposed to more complex, in most cases. This is one of those cases where complex is better, because if you look at the actual, like, cast you can play as more so in the actual game part of the game, you know, very unique silhouettes. If you create a lineup, I could tell you all, like, the playable characters by name. I could not tell you the main characters, because they just look so bland. In addition, it's a Hoyoverse game, so of course it's got gacha mechanics, which, I mean, we all saw coming from a mile away. But it's still worse than I hoped it would be. I had hopes that this would be a lot more free to play in terms of, like, actually getting the content people desire. It offers pity systems, like most gacha games, which is where if you roll enough times without getting enough luck, you will be guaranteed a good roll or the ability to just choose what you want out of the gacha. And that's a good system to have in place, don't get me wrong. It stops people from spending, like, a ridiculous, like, even more ridiculous amount of money than they would. You know there's a definite cap to the amount you have to spend to get what you want, and that is good feature. Problem is, they offer that for the character gacha at 300 draws. You heard me right, 300, 300. And to be clear, the entire tutorial gives you enough, of the currency is holotape, I think it's called. They give you enough holotape for 2 draws. So, other 298, you're on your own, buddy. So you either have to get incredibly lucky and pray you get the character you want with those 2 draws, or, you know, just kind of walk away with the mediocre, like, W battery, or W engine things they give you that kind of, like, offers your main way to customize your characters by giving them certain buffs. Like, some of them will help characters that focus on attacking by giving them more damage boost in their ability to, like, generate more energy, or I think it's called decibels, yeah, for the ultimate. It allows them to generate more stuff for their ultimate, is, like, one ability. So that way you can get to use it quicker. And if you get lucky and get a character, it's probably not even going to be the one you wanted, because they have, like, 6 to 8 characters per gacha. So, not only do you have, like, the very small chance to get a character, the odds of getting the one you want is also really, 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 really difficult. Long story short, it's a very predatory system. It's a game that you play with your credit card instead of actually playing. The first, like, 30 minutes of playing the game, I was in awe. It was really, really good. It was innovative. It felt so smooth. It felt, like, new. And it was, like, magical. Like, it was dopamine hit after dopamine hit, the combat system. After about 30 minutes, it kind of went from being new to just being a grind. Because at least to the point where I got in the game, there were, like, 2 different enemies. 2 different types of enemies. And the game's story already, in my opinion, kind of sucked, which I'm going to get into later. I thought it was very bland, and I did not... It wasn't hooking me, which wasn't helping things to make me want to stick it out and see if it gets better. So yeah, it gets boring. I would... If you have 110 gigabytes to spare and you want to, like, check it out, I would recommend it. Like, for the sake of just, like, seeing what the gameplay's like. It's cool, but I said this in my short. So, context here, there's 2 main game modes. You've got the, well, technically there's 3. But, you've got the exploration ones, which is kind of like a, dungeon crawl, sort of, where you kind of just traverse a map. It's very simple. There are enemies and stuff. If you make contact with an enemy, you go into a fight sequence. And pretty much your goal is to just get the objective and get out. It's very simple. And then you've also got combat ones. And the combat ones feature, like, no exploration, just combat, except the combat's a lot more difficult than, like, an encounter you're going to get on an exploration one. So, those are the 2 main types of game modes. Usually the combat one's like a boss fight. For the most part, it feels like once you've played one combat one and one exploration one, you've kind of played them all. Because they were just, like, the same general loop. Unless you spend money to get the new characters, you're going to be stuck in the same gameplay loop with the same characters with nothing changing. And that is, like, the entire point of the game. It's an investment for Hoyoverse to make money. So, I mean, of course, most games are, but this is in the sense that you have to spend money in order for the game to continue to be fun and innovative. Otherwise, you're stuck with the 3 starter characters, who were charming in their own right, but just get a little sick of the same thing after like 3 hours. In addition, story's slow. I felt like it was way too slow, too many cutscenes. I think the cutscenes were honestly just kind of boring. And that's not to say the cutscenes weren't visually appealing, it's just from the sake of story, it was just, ugh. It's ye olde contractor story. Like, you fish people out from the hollows, or which are basically just like little wormhole dimensions that people go to find loot and steal stuff. You got people who go in and get the stuff, and then you get them out. That is like the main character's role. Except, of course, you actually control the characters. It's very congested and slow. It also teaches you how to use like 7 different menus, or at least that's what it felt like, in the course of like 30 minutes. I am not remembering all that. I felt like it could have been condensed. They could have probably put a few of the menus together, like the shop menu and the phone menu. Probably didn't need to be separate. One could have just been an app on the phone, or a button on the phone menu. Oh yeah, and then my last gripe is also some of the dialogue options don't line up with what the character actually says. I don't mean like, actually, the dialogue option actually paraphrase. No, I'm not talking about that. Like, if it would paraphrase it, I would be fine with it. But genuinely, sometimes it just says something completely different. Like, not necessarily like a complete 180, but it's just different from the direction that the, like, dialogue option synopsis would lead you to believe. Which I think is pretty misleading and could cause you to, like, take a direction in the story you don't want to. Overall, the game is neat. I think it's neat. It's kind of like a really, really polished tech demo, in my opinion. I think it's a really good game if you just play it for 30 minutes. I think it overall just lacks substance that's going to be instead replaced by DLC over time that you have to spend money on. And more money and more money. But I get it, like, Hoyoverse, they're entrepreneurs. It makes sense that they're trying to make money. This just feels kind of predatory to me. That, like, it's the only reliable way to get characters is by throwing a credit card at the problem. Like, even Genshin has, like, some mechanics. At least I've talked to friends who've played Genshin, and they said there are some mechanics that let you get some pretty good stuff for free. I just think it's an attempt to market the same predatory business tactic under a new label, and with, like, new character designs. Perhaps Genshin wasn't making as much as they wanted it to make, so they decided to outsource it to another game with a different setting to try and attract a different audience into spending more money. So yeah, I better not see comments that are like, local man discovers how business works. And I wouldn't be saying this if I didn't feel like the whole gacha system in itself was like a generally predatory system. Rant over, that's really mostly that's my piece on Hoyoverse's new game, Zenless Zone Zero. I think it's alright for what it is, but to get any substance out of it, you have to spend money. And in my opinion, it's definitely not worth the hard drive space. As someone with a terabyte of storage, that game takes up 101 gigabytes, which is it 110 or 101? Either way, it takes up 1/10 of my hard drive, and it is definitely not worth that to me. Yeah, I would personally recommend against playing it unless you have the time, storage space, and money to kill. And in that case, I would honestly probably suggest just go play Genshin, because that game at least has some substance. In addition to that, it also has the Oratrice Mechaniste de Annalise Cardinal. God, you have no idea how many tries that took me. Holy shit. Okay. But with that said, thank you guys for watching. Subscribe, and I'll do more stupid bullshit in the future. Bye.